I'll never forget the Christmas that broke me. Not because of what I received, but because of what it revealed. It was supposed to be a season of warmth, family, and joy. The kind of holiday where love wrapped around you tighter than any blanket. Instead, I sat in the corner of our living room, staring at the glossy wrapping paper scattered across the floor, my brother's laughter filling the air, and my parents' proud smiles shining like spotlights, but never in my direction. That year, my brother tore open a box to find the latest iPhone, gleaming under the tree lights like a symbol of his golden status in our family. My parents clapped and beamed, as though gifting him that device was proof of their endless love. And me? I was handed a small box, so light it felt empty. I peeled back the paper, hope hanging by a thread, only to find socks. Plain, ordinary socks. No thought, no care, no meaning, just socks. At that moment, the room felt colder than the snow falling outside. The message was clear. My brother was the star, the favorite, the one worth investing in. And me, I was background noise, invisible, forgettable, a burden. But here's the part no one saw coming. What they thought was a small humiliation planted the seed of something bigger in me. A fire. That moment of raw hurt became the spark that changed everything. They thought giving me socks was harmless, maybe even funny. But they had no idea that one day, the child they dismissed would grow into the person who held the power they once flaunted. So, how did a forgotten Christmas gift become the beginning of the end of my family's control over me? How did socks turn into the symbol of a storm that would shatter the golden pedestal they built for my brother? Stay with me, because this story isn't just about gifts. It's about betrayal dressed as family love. It's about being silenced until your voice becomes too loud to ignore. And most of all, it's about how sometimes the smallest, cruelest gestures can ignite the biggest revolutions. If I'm being honest, that Christmas wasn't the first time I felt like an outsider in my own home. It was just the moment that crystallized years of favoritism, the kind that eats away at you slowly until one day it's too heavy to ignore. Growing up, my parents had two kids, me and my younger brother, Ethan. From the day he was born, Ethan was treated like he was made of gold. He had the kind of smile that could charm strangers in the grocery store, and my parents seemed to take that as proof that he was destined for greatness. They bragged about his first words, his first steps, his school achievements, even when those achievements were average at best. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the child who could be left alone without worry, the one expected to pick up after myself, the one who didn't need praise because you're mature, you don't need constant attention. At first, I told myself it was fine. Maybe being invisible wasn't the worst thing. But as the years went on, the imbalance became harder to ignore. Birthdays made it painfully obvious. Ethan's birthdays were productions, balloons, parties at trampoline parks, and gifts that filled the entire living room. Mine? A cake baked at home, usually with candles recycled from the year before and a single gift wrapped in plain paper. Sometimes the gift wasn't even what I wanted. It was practical, something my parents thought I needed rather than something that might bring me joy. Socks, pajamas, notebooks. School was no different. When Ethan struggled in math, my parents hired a tutor immediately. "He just needs a little extra help and we'll make sure he gets it," my mom said, brushing his hair back like he was the center of the universe. When I asked if I could join the school art program, a program I had been dreaming about, they shook their heads. "It's too expensive, and besides, art won't take you anywhere. Focus on your regular classes." It was like living in two worlds under one roof. Ethan's world, where everything was possible, and mine, where everything was limited. And yet I kept trying to earn their love. I got good grades, not because anyone was pushing me, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd notice. I cleaned the kitchen without being asked, folded laundry, even helped Ethan with his homework. But instead of gratitude, I got brushed aside. "You're so helpful," they'd say, their eyes already drifting back to Ethan. By the time that infamous Christmas rolled around, I had already built up years of quiet resentment. But I was also clinging to this fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things would be different. Maybe that year they'd see me. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with hints. My parents whispered to each other in the kitchen, hiding shopping bags in the closet, sneaking around like Santa's little elves. Ethan was buzzing with excitement, convinced he was getting the latest iPhone. I laughed it off, telling myself he was probably just exaggerating. After all, how could my parents afford something like that when they'd told me over and over we didn't have extra money? Still, I let myself believe that maybe I'd get something thoughtful, something that said, "We see you too." I didn't want an iPhone. I just wanted proof that I mattered. Christmas morning came. The tree twinkled in the corner and my parents were practically glowing with excitement. Ethan tore into his gifts first, paper flying everywhere, and sure enough, there it was. The iPhone. Brand new, shiny, sleek. His face lit up like it was the best day of his life. My parents clapped, laughing, showering him with kisses. Then it was my turn. I reached for the small box they had set aside for me. My heart thumped with anticipation, whispering to me that maybe they had saved the best for last. I peeled back the paper, lifted the lid, and stared at a bundle of socks. Socks. The room went silent for me, even as Ethan cheered and waved his phone in the air. My parents smiled at me weakly, as if socks were enough, as if I should be grateful for the bare minimum. I forced a smile, the kind that barely stretches across your face, and muttered, "Thanks." Inside, though, something cracked. That was the moment when years of being overlooked collided with the reality of those socks in my hands. They didn't see me. They never had. And worse, they didn't care. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the socks into the fire and demand to know why my brother got luxury while I got scraps. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat, plastered on a fake smile, and watched as Ethan played with his phone, basking in the glow of being the favorite child. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. I would never let them make me feel this small again. If they weren't going to give me the life I deserved, I would find a way to take it for myself. And that promise, that quiet vow in the dark, was the start of everything that came next. That night after Christmas, I cried quietly into my pillow. It wasn't just about the socks, it was about what they symbolized. It was about years of being sidelined, of my feelings brushed aside, of being told with actions, if not words, that I simply wasn't worth as much as my brother. The socks were just the final straw, the proof I could no longer ignore. The next morning, I came downstairs, and Ethan was already glued to his new iPhone. He was showing off the features, laughing about how fast it was, how sharp the camera looked. My parents hovered over him, excited as if they had gotten the phone themselves. "Pretty cool, huh?" my dad said, patting Ethan on the back. "Yeah, thanks, guys, this is awesome," Ethan grinned. I stood there, waiting for them to notice me. Maybe they'd at least ask if I liked my gift. Maybe they'd explain why they gave Ethan something so expensive while I got something so small. But no, they didn't even look my way. So I forced the words out myself. "Thanks for the socks." My mom glanced at me briefly, smiled, and said, "Oh, you're welcome. You needed some, right?" Then her attention went straight back to Ethan. That moment burned into me, not just because of the gift, but because it confirmed what I'd been suspecting for years. They didn't see me as their equal. I wasn't the child they wanted to brag about, invest in, or spoil. I was just there. From then on, things only got worse. Every time Ethan got something new, shoes, gadgets, even extra money for outings, I got reminders of how responsible and self-sufficient I was. My parents disguised neglect as independence. "You don't need as much," they'd say. "You're stronger, you can handle it." But here's the thing, I was still a kid. I wanted to be celebrated too. I wanted to feel like my presence mattered. Instead, I carried the weight of being invisible. One day at school, Ethan bragged to his friends about his iPhone. He waved it around, let them take turns playing with it, and I overheard one of them say, "Wow, your parents must really love you." The words hit me like a punch in the chest. Because deep down, I had been asking myself the same question. Did they really love me at all? It wasn't just gifts. It was the way they defended Ethan no matter what. If he messed up, they smoothed it over. If I made even the smallest mistake, I was scolded for hours about responsibility. When he got average grades, they said, "He's doing his best." When I got top marks, they said, "Well, we knew you'd do fine." There was no praise, no pride, no recognition, just expectation. One evening, I tried to confront them. I asked why Ethan always got more, why it felt like they cared about him more than me. My dad sighed and said, "It's not about more. Ethan just needs a little extra help. You're older, more mature. You'll understand someday." "But it's not fair," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "Life isn't fair," my mom replied flatly, turning back to her phone. That sentence became a dagger in my heart. Life isn't fair. It was their excuse for everything. And maybe it was true, but it didn't make it hurt any less. As the months passed, I started pulling away. I stopped trying so hard to win their approval because deep down I knew I'd never get it. But at the same time, a seed of determination was growing inside me. If they weren't going to give me opportunities, I'd make them for myself. I threw myself into schoolwork, not for their praise, but for my own survival. I joined after-school clubs, found part-time jobs, and saved every penny I could. My parents didn't notice, too wrapped up in Ethan's world. But I was building something quietly, brick by brick. Then came the breaking point. It was Ethan's birthday, just a few months after that Christmas. He had a huge party at a fancy venue with all his friends invited. He got piles of gifts, including a brand new gaming console. My parents were practically glowing, taking pictures, bragging to relatives about how lucky they were to have such a talented son. And me, I stood in the corner holding a paper plate of cake, trying to disappear. Not one person asked me to be in a picture. Not one person acknowledged me beyond the obligatory, "Hi." When the party ended, I helped clean up, stacking chairs, throwing away trash, while Ethan and my parents laughed about how successful the day was. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being used. I was the extra pair of hands, the quiet shadow that kept things running while Ethan basked in the spotlight. That night, I made another promise to myself. If they weren't going to see me as part of the family, then fine. I would stop trying to be. I would create a life so big, so successful, that they'd have no choice but to notice me. And someday, I'd make sure they understood exactly what they had thrown away. When you've been ignored long enough, something inside you hardens. It was like a quiet switch flipped after Ethan's birthday party. I wasn't going to wait for love or fairness anymore. I was going to carve my own path, even if it meant walking it alone. The first step was money. I knew if I wanted freedom, I had to save every dollar I could. So while Ethan lounged around playing video games on his brand new console, I got a job at a small cafe downtown. It wasn't glamorous. I wiped tables, brewed coffee, and mopped floors. But for the first time, I had control over something. Those paychecks, though small, were mine. My parents didn't care much. In fact, they seemed relieved. "Good," my dad said when I told him I'd gotten the job. "Now you can buy the little things you want so we don't have to stretch ourselves thin." That sentence stung because it confirmed what I already knew. They had no plans to invest in me the way they did in Ethan. But it also fueled me. Fine. If I was on my own, I'd own it. At school, I poured myself into academics. I wasn't just trying to pass, I wanted to excel. I signed up for every scholarship opportunity I could find, staying up late to perfect essays while Ethan bragged about his iPhone and complained about homework. The difference between us became obvious. He was given everything and valued nothing. I was given nothing, but I learned how to value everything. One night, I was in my room studying when I overheard my parents talking downstairs. "I'm so glad we got Ethan that phone," my mom said. "He deserves it, he's just so special." "What about her?" my dad asked, his tone casual. "She's fine," my mom replied. "She doesn't need much, she's not like him." Those words carved into me deeper than I can explain. She's not like him. They didn't mean it in a good way. To them, Ethan was extraordinary, worth every sacrifice. I was just filler. But instead of breaking me, their words became fuel. "I thought you're right, I'm not like him. I'll prove I'm more." Over time, my socks, the ones they had given me that Christmas, became a symbol. At first, I hated them. But then I started wearing them deliberately, like armor. Every time I pulled them on, I reminded myself, this is how little they thought of me. This is where I started. And one day I'll rise so far above it, they won't even recognize the person they dismissed. My independence grew stronger. I saved up enough money to buy my own used laptop, something my parents said they couldn't afford for me. It wasn't sleek or new like Ethan's phone, but it was mine. And I used it to apply for internships, scholarships, and online programs. Meanwhile, Ethan was still the center of their world. He got new clothes, new gadgets, even extra cash for outings with friends. And yet, he always seemed dissatisfied, complaining when the Wi-Fi lagged or when dinner wasn't what he wanted. It was like watching a play where the favorite character kept being fed lines, while I learned to write my own script. The turning point came when I got accepted into a summer program at a local university. It was competitive, and I had to work hard for it, but when I opened the acceptance letter, I nearly burst into tears. Finally, someone saw me for my potential. I rushed downstairs, holding the letter out like a golden ticket. "I got in," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. My parents looked up briefly from the TV. "That's nice," my mom said, "but are you sure you can handle it? It sounds like a lot." Ethan snorted. "What's the point? You're not even going to a real college yet." The room spun. I stood there, letter in hand, my achievement dismissed in seconds. They didn't even ask about the details, didn't even congratulate me. That was the moment I realized I would never get their validation, and maybe I didn't need it. So I went anyway. That summer program opened doors I never thought possible. I met professors who encouraged me, mentors who believed in me, and peers who saw me as an equal, not a shadow. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I worked harder than I ever had, fueled by every sock, every slight, every ignored moment. And when the program ended, I had not just experience but connections, people who saw my worth even when my family didn't. By the time I returned home, something in me had changed. I wasn't just the forgotten child anymore. I was someone who had tasted independence, who had glimpsed a world beyond favoritism. But my parents didn't notice. Ethan was still their son, and they orbited around him. That was fine, because I had stopped orbiting them. I was building my own universe. And deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. Coming back from that summer program felt like stepping into two different worlds. At the university, people had treated me like I mattered, like I had something valuable to contribute. Back at home, I was still the background character in the story of Ethan's life. When I walked through the door, Ethan was sitting on the couch, scrolling on his iPhone. My parents were fawning over him, asking about his day, laughing at his jokes. I set down my worn-out duffel bag, full of notes and achievements I was proud of, and not one of them even looked up. That moment should have crushed me, but instead, it made me realize just how far I had already come. I wasn't angry, I was determined. Their indifference no longer defined me. Senior year of high school began, and while Ethan coasted through with average grades, I was grinding every day. I applied for scholarships like my life depended on it, because it did. I knew my parents weren't going to pay a dime toward my college education. All their spare money went to Ethan, and they didn't even try to hide it. Meanwhile, Ethan got his driver's license, and my parents gifted him a car. It wasn't brand new, but it was still more than I could have dreamed of. I asked once, half joking, "So when do I get a car?" My dad chuckled. "You don't need one, you're responsible, you'll figure it out." That sentence said it all. Ethan was given luxury because he was irresponsible, and I was denied it because I was. They rewarded weakness and punished strength. But here's the twist. Their neglect became my greatest weapon. While Ethan drove to parties, I biked to the library. While he scrolled on social media, I studied. While he leaned on my parents, I leaned on myself. And when scholarship acceptance letters began flooding in, I realized something incredible. I had options. The biggest shock came when I received a full-ride offer from a prestigious university out of state. I held that letter in my hands, trembling with disbelief. It was everything I had worked for, the escape hatch I had dreamed of. When I told my parents, they blinked in mild surprise. "That's good, I guess," my mom said, "but how are you going to manage so far away?" Ethan rolled his eyes. "You'll never make it. College is harder than high school. You'll probably drop out." I didn't even argue. I just smiled. because deep down I knew I wasn't the one who wouldn't make it. College was everything I had hoped for and more. I thrived there. My professors respected me, my peers admired my work ethic, and for the first time I wasn't overshadowed by Ethan's existence. Nobody compared me to anyone else. I was simply myself. I got involved in research, joined student organizations, and even started a part-time tutoring business to support myself. The money wasn't huge, but it was mine. Every paycheck was proof that I didn't need my parents' handouts. Meanwhile, back at home, cracks were forming in the golden boy's life. Ethan, despite all the support and gifts, was floundering. He barely passed his classes, partied too much, and burned through money like water. My parents bailaid him out time and time again, but their patience and finances were thinning. They called me sometimes, mostly to complain about Ethan. "He just doesn't take responsibility," my mom sighed once. "He's always in trouble. Why can't he be more like you?" The irony nearly made me laugh. All my life, they had dismissed me because I wasn't like Ethan. Now, they were realizing the monster they had created. But I didn't rub it in. I simply listened, nodded, and went back to building my own future. By my junior year of college, I had landed a paid internship that offered not only experience but also a path to a full-time career. I was thriving. Meanwhile, Ethan had dropped out of his college program, burned through 3 jobs, and was back at home, unemployed and still coddled. When I visited during holidays, the contrast was stark. I would sit at the dinner table, sharing stories about my projects, the people I was meeting, the future I was building. Ethan would sulk, muttering about how hard life was, how unfair it all felt. One Christmas stands out vividly. I came home, and under the tree there were gifts piled high for Ethan: clothes, gadgets, expensive cologne. For me, a single pair of socks. The same gift they had given me years ago. But this time I didn't feel humiliated. I felt powerful, because those socks no longer symbolized rejection. They symbolized resilience. They reminded me of how far I had come despite everything. That night, as Ethan whined about not getting the latest iPhone model, I sat quietly, smiling to myself. He was drowning in entitlement, and I was rising on the wings of self-sufficiency. The roles had reversed. My parents didn't realize it yet, but they were watching the slow collapse of their golden child and the quiet rise of the one they had overlooked. And deep down, I knew the day was coming when they would need me more than I would ever need them. I don't think anyone ever expects the moment of reversal, the day when the overlooked, dismissed, background child suddenly becomes the one holding all the cards. For me, that day came years after college, when life had settled into something far bigger than I could have dreamed. By the time I was 25, I had a career I loved, a healthy savings account, and even a modest but beautiful little house of my own. I wasn't rich, but compared to the scraps I had grown up with, I felt wealthy in every sense: financially, emotionally, spiritually. Ethan, however, was on the opposite end of the spectrum. He was 26, still living with our parents, unemployed, and struggling with debt he couldn't crawl out of. The golden boy who once flaunted iPhones, cars, and endless attention was now a bitter man whose biggest achievement was complaining about the world being against him. My parents had aged, too. The years of enabling Ethan had drained them, financially and emotionally. The house needed repairs, their retirement savings were thinner than they admitted, and the energy they once had to defend Ethan's every action had dimmed. And that's when it happened. One Sunday evening, I got a call. It was my mom. Her voice was trembling, soft in a way I hadn't heard before. "Sweetheart," she said, "could we come over to talk?" I almost laughed at the word sweetheart. She hadn't called me that in years. When they arrived, Ethan trailing behind them like a shadow, the tension was thick. We sat in my living room, me on my couch, them on the chairs I had bought with my own money, and I realized something shocking: they looked small. For the first time in my life, they weren't towering over me with authority. They were just people, fragile, flawed, and desperate. My dad cleared his throat. We need your help." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. My mom clasped her hands together as if praying. Your brother is struggling. He has debts. He can't find stable work. We've done all we can, but we're exhausted. We thought maybe. Maybe you could take him in, my dad finished, his voice tight. I sat back, stunned. The irony was suffocating. These were the people who had once ignored me while showering Ethan with everything. These were the same parents who thought socks were an appropriate Christmas gift for me while buying him cars and gadgets. And now, here they were, asking me to save the very boy who had been their golden child. Ethan finally looked up. His eyes weren't angry, they were hollow. I just need a fresh start, he muttered. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel the weight of their request. Finally, I said, do you remember when you gave me socks for Christmas? When Ethan got an iPhone and I got nothing that showed you actually saw me. My mom flinched. My dad sighed, rubbing his forehead. Ethan groaned, oh, not this again. Yes, I said firmly. This again, because those socks weren't just a gift. They were a symbol of how you treated me my whole life, like I didn't matter, like I was just filler in the story of Ethan's greatness. And now you're sitting here asking me to bail him out. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock on my wall. Then my mom whispered, we made mistakes. We didn't see you clearly. But you've always been so strong, so capable. We thought you didn't need us the way he did. Her words were both an excuse and a confession. And in a way, I understood. They had mistaken resilience for invincibility. They thought neglect was okay because I'd survive it. And maybe, in a twisted way, they were right. But that didn't erase the years of hurt. I looked at Ethan. I'll help you, but not the way you expect. You're not moving in here. I'm not your safety net. If you want my help, you're going to work for it. His face twisted. Work, what do you mean? I own a small tutoring business, I said. It's growing. I need assistance. People to do the grunt work, the scheduling, the calls. It's not glamorous, but it's a job. You can start there. Minimum wage, earn your way back. Or don't. That's your choice. Ethan looked like I had slapped him. Minimum wage? I'm your brother, you're supposed to. I'm not supposed to do anything, I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. I built my life without anyone's help. I was given socks while you were given the world. If you want to change your life, prove you're willing to work for it. My parents shifted uncomfortably, but neither defended him. I think, in that moment, they finally understood the truth they had avoided for so long. Ethan wasn't a golden child anymore. He was just a man who had wasted every advantage he was given. He left that night angry, muttering that I was selfish and heartless. My parents lingered a little longer, apologizing in broken sentences that didn't quite erase the past. But I didn't need their apologies anymore. I had closure. Weeks later, Ethan showed up again. This time he was different, quieter, defeated but not defiant. Is the job still open? He asked. I nodded. It is. And so, my brother, the boy who once waved iPhones in my face while I unwrapped socks, became my employee. It wasn't easy. He struggled, complained, made mistakes. But slowly, painfully, he learned. And for the first time in our lives, the balance shifted. He had to look up to me. He had to respect me. As for my parents, they visit sometimes. They no longer gush about Ethan's achievements because there aren't any left to praise. Instead, they ask about my business, my projects, my life. It's clumsy, like they're learning how to be parents to me for the first time. And maybe, in their own flawed way, they are. The truth is, I don't need their validation anymore. I've already built a life they never imagined for me. But there's a certain poetic justice in seeing them finally realize what I always knew. I wasn't the forgotten child. I was the strong one, the survivor, the builder. And while they gave Ethan the iPhone and me the socks, in the end, I'm the one who has everything that truly matters.